Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kate Zernike of the New York Times and our esteemed panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are here to talk about innovative approaches to gun violence through public safety and preventive social programs and partnerships. And we have a number of people from the mayor's office, and we have Commissioner Sewell here today, so I'll be introducing them. First out is Sheena Wright, who is Deputy Mayor for Strategic Initiatives for the City of New York. Prior to her appointment, Deputy Mayor Wright served as the transition chair for the Adams team, helping to engage and oversee over 600 stakeholders. Sheena previously served as the first female president and CEO of United Way, New York City. She was named #1 on City and State New York's Nonprofit Power 100, listed in Crain's New York Business's Notable Black Leaders and Executives, was appointed Mayor de Blasio's Education Sector Advisory Council and Governor Cuomo's New York Forward Reopening Advisory Board. Sheena Wright has previously served as a trustee for Columbia University and as a board member for New Visions for Public Schools, NYC Rise, and the New York City Regional Economic Development Council. Next up, we have John Devito, who is the special agent in charge of the New York office of the ATF. John began serving as a special agent in charge of the New York Field Division of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives in January 2019. He is responsible for ATF operations throughout the entire state of New York and is a member of the Senior Executive Service. He's worked for ATF since 1997. His posts of duty include Miami, Washington, Virginia, New Jersey, and now New York. Next up, we have, I have my order here. We have Commissioner Sewell. Keechant Sewell was appointed the 45th Police Commissioner of the City of New York by Mayor Adams in December of 2021. She previously served as the Nassau County Police Department's Chief of Detectives. She joined the Nassau County Police Department in 1997 and graduated from the Police Academy as a class speaker. She's also a graduate of the 235th session of the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, where she was selected by her peers to be the class spokesman for the National Academy's commencement address. And finally, we have A.T. Mitchell, who is the founder and CEO of Man Up, Inc. USA. Born and raised in Brooklyn, A.T. Mitchell made history in June of 2022 when appointed by Mayor Adams as the first New York City gun violence prevention czar and co-chair of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. He is the founder and chief executive officer of Man Up, Inc., which is a comprehensive multicultural social service agency that provides violence prevention and intervention, youth services, employment training, and other family-related services that encourage community empowerment. So thank you all for joining us today. Commissioner Sewell, I wanted to start with you just to ground the discussion in news events of the recent months and ask you about the effect of the Supreme Court decision limiting what communities can do on gun permission.
So the Bruin decision.
Yes, sorry,
the Bruin decision actually changed our licensing scheme in that we're not allowed to evaluate the proper cause standard for licensing of firearms. But overall, the NYPD's ability to detect, interdict, and make apprehensions for people who are carrying illegal firearms has not changed in any way. Mm-hmm. The state law actually expanded some of the rules when it comes to character references, social media checks for licensing, but we will continue to do what we do, which is interdict and apprehend individuals carrying illegal firearms. That still remains a crime in New York City. And I think it's important to note that New York City always had gun-free zones. The list is now expanded to include more places, but our posture and our ability to make apprehensions and identify those who are carrying those firearms illegally has not changed. I will say that if an officer has reasonable suspicion to believe someone is carrying an illegal firearm, we will respond and take the appropriate action.
Right, okay. Now I think we're going to talk about the programs that the city is doing with social community organizations. So maybe I'll turn to you, Deputy Mayor Wright. Can you discuss New York City's approach for tackling gun violence through the combination of public safety and social interventions?
Sure. And thank you so much, and so happy to be here in this conversation today that's so critically important. The way our administration thinks about, gun violence is that we really think about community well-being and community safety. And our commissioner actually just said a couple days ago, and I know she'll talk about it as well, that it's a shared responsibility that we all have to be working in concert to ensure that our communities are well and safe. There is a study that was done about 20 years ago by Columbia University that showed that 7 neighborhoods represented about 70% of the prison population in the state of New York. So we know that, and the focus of our administration is getting to the root causes. Gun violence is a symptom. Crime stats are a symptom. The root causes are access to opportunity. The root causes are educational advancement. The root causes are employment. The root causes are mental health services. And so what Mayor Adams has done is he's asked us, me along with A.T. Mitchell, to co-chair a task force across government. It includes the Department of Health, Department of Social Services, our small business services, many agencies that touch the community health and well-being so that we can work together to deal with what those root causes are and make sure that there's access to opportunity, that there's services, that there's supports, that there are resources, so we don't get to the symptom of gun violence. And that's one of the ways that we're focused, kind of going upstream, as well as obviously dealing with the symptoms themselves.
So talk a little bit about the mental health problems, because that's what we always hear, and that seems to be, in the great debate about gun control, that seems to be the one place where both parties can agree. So talk a little bit about that and how important that is.
Well, I think, there's a whole spectrum of mental health challenges and needs. And when we think about coming out of COVID-19, we are in despair, right? And to hold a gun in your hand and to fire it at someone, you have to be in some level of despair, distress, can't, control. There's a whole lot of issues there. You think that this is, a path that's going to resolve an issue, and there's so much trauma that's associated with that. So, part of what the work that we're doing is working with, A.T. Mitchell and organizations like his that he's founded across the city that have credible messengers. They've been there. They know how it feels. They know what some of the challenges are to really be a point, to work with young people who are experiencing trauma and mental distress. We just signed a historic memorandum of understanding with the police commissioner and the commissioner of health and others. When a young person is at a traumatic incident and they, whether someone has died or there's a shooting, it's about handling them with care, making sure that we wrap around all kinds of supports to address that trauma so there's no retaliation, so that we can address some of those long-term issues.
Even people who've just been witness to the shooting.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Absolutely, because that's a very traumatic experience.
Right.
So mental health is a key issue in this, and I think some of the gun violence prevention work really was rooted in the health department initially.
A.T., do you want to tell us about that a little bit?
Yes, so we've been actually now in this administration and others previous to this, working from, as mentioned, from the health perspective or the health approach to public safety.
Right.
And so the way that we originally looked at this was from a health lens. There's trauma, there's a whole lot of other things that are associated when a person has been shot and or killed. And that violence is actually a disease. And if left untreated, it can spread. And no one is immune. And so, as mentioned, people have a lot of different reasons why they turn to gun violence. And so what we like to think of ourselves, the men and women that we train, are public health care workers who go into the communities that have been traumatized and affected, and go in there to bring some sort of wellness and some help and some resources that's also been talked about.
But as the deputy mayor said, we talk about this shared responsibility for public safety, because I think we all agree that we're not going to police our way out of some of the things that we are seeing every single day. And it really takes that holistic approach, the whole of government approach, communities, federal partners, everyone working together to be able to address the root causes of this level of violence and these crimes that are occurring in the city. So I think this administration has made that a focus, and we try to reinforce that with all of our partners together.
How much is that an adjustment, though, for you as a police commissioner and the people who are working underneath you Is this a new approach? I mean, we've heard of this in similar approaches in other cities, but I think it is still, it requires a little wrapping your brain around it, doesn't it, for people who've been on the force for a long time?
I believe when you're in law enforcement, you realize you can't do this alone. Because we can keep arresting people, but if they keep getting out or if they keep resorting to that behavior, we recognize that there's something else going on here. And like the deputy mayor said, there are underlying causes that we have to address in order to be able to stop people from committing violent acts in the future. We have to be able to look at our youth. This summer, the NYPD alone had 800 youth in our summer youth employment program. That's not across the city, that's just the NYPD.
Wow.
Our public-private partnerships help us address the things that lead to crimes of desperation or people who feel as though they have no other recourse. We have to be able to go to our youth and say, what can we do better in those areas, and rehabilitate those who may be looking for a different path as well. And we do that with our partners.
John, talk about the role of ATF, and in particular, I think you're very interested in data collection, or the importance of that, and sort of figuring out, I don't know if you want to call them hotspots, but where the problems are.
Well, first of all, I'm kind of angry that the commissioner stole my term. This is a whole of government approach to addressing gun violence in our country. You know, everyone thinks that new laws, new regulations are going to have some type of great impact, and they will if properly applied. But the solution to gun violence reduction in this country is the men and women in this room, the men and women on this table, all working together in a coordinated effort to address and identify the drivers of violent crime in these communities. Because again, you know, in the United States, we're dealing with 500+ million guns on the streets of America, another 18 to 20 million added every single year. For law enforcement to identify the means by which those firearms end up in the hands of the criminal element is almost an insurmountable task. So the big policy that I've been trying to push here with my partners in NYPD as well as across the state is to weaponize the intelligence that we have at our disposal on a daily basis. The tracing of the firearm, the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. You know, in America we have very unique tools. The tracing process, which is where it will tell you where the gun was born and where it died. NIBIN, National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, will tell you how that gun lived its life of crime. We have to utilize these tools to identify that very small percentage of the criminal element who are actually driving violent crimes in the communities. It is a health crisis. It's almost like identifying that cancerous tumor within that healthy community. And we as law enforcement have to be better. We have to evolve. We have to utilize this intelligence on a daily basis to drive our investigative priorities, because again, we can't win this through a battle of attrition. We can't win this through a surge. Well, we have to use surgical precision to go in, remove that cancerous tumor, that bad element, that 1% out of that healthy tissue so the healthy tissue can thrive. And the only way we can do that is by working together, breaking down silos of information and intelligence, utilizing that information on a daily basis to make sure that our investigators are properly trained and equipped to identify that small percentage, and then working with our social programs as well as the politicians to push that message out is that law enforcement's there to help. We're not there to penalize on a daily basis. We're there to help identify and give you opportunities to expand and grow and be healthy.
Commissioner, this may be a strange question, but I'm wondering, I feel like gun violence is one of those problems that everyone feels a little helpless about, right? Like we see these shootings over and over, and you just think, like, when is it going to end? You know, Newtown and then Uvalde. What do you think there, I mean, part of your job is outward facing, right, to the public. What is the role of the public, and what, in terms of supporting the work that you're doing? And, you know, we hear a lot about crime in New York City, even from people outside who don't live here and maybe have never even visited, but what is that, how is that a challenge for you, working with the public and public opinion?
Again, we go back to that shared responsibility. The NYPD strategy for combating gun violence is victim-centric. It is intelligence-based, and it is precision. Going back to what John said, it's about going after those criminal few who repeatedly prey on the people of this city. So while we will always be victim-centric, we actually work with the public as well. Back to A.T. Mitchell's group, the community that gets involved. We've seen a tremendous amount of support from the public to help us in terms of advocacy. We have been saying over and over again, while there may have been well-meaning reforms that took place that we supported in 2020, we have to make sure that we are holding those responsible and that they face consequences for criminal behavior. We are arresting the same people over and over again for offenses. There are people with open gun offenses that are still out in the street. While we recognize the fact that some changes had to be made, we do realize that some amendments have to happen for us to be able to hold people accountable. And the advocacy of the public helps us tremendously in that effort.
And John, you were telling me backstage that you feel like the mayor's office has been very supportive. What are the things that give you hope about, what are the specific programs? Like, again, if we're looking for things that actually work.
Well, if you look at the mayor's blueprints for, reducing gun violence in this city, in my experience, I've been doing this a long time as well as everyone else on this panel, Mayor Adams' entire team has been so proactive to work with law enforcement, to listen to new ideas. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for new innovative ways to mitigate the risk that gun violence poses to the public. And any partner, any champion of what I'm doing in law enforcement, what we're doing in the social arena, to help us continue to push this message and to give me the political clout, for lack of a better term, to push my agendas, because at the end of the day, everything I'm doing is for the betterment of public safety. And my partnerships and the collaboration and breaking down of the silos and to build this team, I need all the support I can possibly get. You know, we are all in this together. Everyone has different tool sets they can bring to the table. My philosophy is I bring everybody, put everything into the same soup bowl and allow everybody to eat from it, because everyone's going to benefit in different ways, but all with a common goal, reducing gun violence and protecting these communities.
AT, do you want to talk about a specific program that you think is sort of particularly promising?
Yes, what I like about what I'm listening to and seeing and knowing and witnessing is the collaboration. The fact that today we have a holistic approach to reducing gun violence. And so that 1% is what we focus on as well. In our work that we do on a task force level, we look at those precincts where unfortunate gun violence is at its most high, and we go in on to that 1%. And our thinking and mindset is that if we can reach them where they are and convince them that the act of committing violence is not going to be in their favor, and we can win them over, I think we're all winning at the end of the day. You know, even in those communities that we work within, the overwhelming majority of the community are really law-abiding people that are just going about their daily lives, and they just want to be able to live a free and healthy life. The work that we're doing on an organization level citywide, there is so many other organizations that are grassroots that are doing amazing work on the front line to reduce violence, that it is sometimes it goes unnoticed, because in between each shooting, there's a number of mediations and interactions and conflicts that are being really talked down, even sometimes on social media. It's interrupting violence at its core. And so our organization, Man Up Inc., is a part of a nationwide coalition that goes out into those neighborhoods. They're based in those communities, and these men and women are credible. They have the relationship, the influence to be able to go into these neighborhoods and talk to that highest risk and work them down to hopefully become productive members of our city.
When we talk about initiatives, I think one of the most promising initiatives that we have right now is our Gun Violence Strategies Partnership. It's a meeting every single day with our local, state, and federal partners in the same room to go over the shooting incidents from the previous day and the arrests from the previous day, so we can present the best cases possible. We have parole, probation, prosecutors, everyone in the room who can look at it in a 360-degree way to say, how can we make this case better and hold people accountable and prevent future violence, oftentimes retaliatory violence. I'm very encouraged and inspired by this administration, because it is the whole of government approach where we're looking at mental health, we're looking at social services, but we have to be able to hold those people who intend to commit malice against their fellow human beings accountable every single day.
Thank you for that. I'm also curious, Deputy Mayor Wright, about we heard so much a few years ago about, there's the role of the police force and defund the police, and there was a lot of hostility about it. Talk to us about how the mayor's office handles that question.
It's interesting. Coming into the administration, we conducted, in partnership with philanthropy, the largest public policy survey ever in the history of New York. We spoke to about 64,000 people, almost 20,000 young people, to ask them, what do you want? What are your priorities? What are your needs? And overwhelmingly, particularly in neighborhoods and communities where there is high crime, there was a desire to have protection from the police. There was not a desire to not have protection.
And I think that's something that people misunderstand, is this idea that these communities don't want law enforcement. In fact, they do. They just don't want to be harassed by law enforcement.
Absolutely. They want public safety and justice, right? And it's just kind of basic and fundamental, and I think it's something that we certainly appreciate. And the kind of policing that is about promoting safety, that is helpful and supportive, is what communities want, and that's what this administration is focused on delivering. When you have a mayor that challenged the NYPD and its practices around stop, question, and frisk, that challenged the NYPD as it related to diversity and making sure you had appropriate representation in diverse communities, and you have a police commissioner that is committed to, you know, as a core principle, being in partnership with community and really policing. And you asked about, you know, is it different? I think it is different with her leadership and with the mayor's leadership. And that's the kind of policing that communities want, and that is what this administration is committed to delivering.
Right. Did you want to answer that question too, about just in terms of, you know, how communities are, how you're feeling, what is your relationship with those communities? Do you feel like?
So to her point, she's absolutely right. We have seen overwhelming support
Right.
from communities because these communities are also overwhelmingly the victims of violence as well. So they have supported us. They've told us they want more policing in their communities, but they want fair and effective policing as well, and that's what we're here to do. So I'm encouraged going forward. We have a lot of outreach in these communities, a lot of programs in these communities as well. The NYPD does a lot with options programs for our youth and just the everyday contact with these communities. I think the first contact you have with the police department should never be negative. It should always be something positive where you have an experience to take back and a reference point. So every time we meet with our community leaders, they tell us they're happy to see us. They want to see more of us. But it's our responsibility to see them and for us not to go into the communities and say what we can give you. We need to find out from them what they need from their police department.
And I'm curious, we have just a little bit of time left. What is it like doing this as you come out, well, we hope coming out of a pandemic, right? We've actually, these past 2.5 years have been unprecedented. It has led to, you know, real stress and mental health. Talk to us about how that's affected your work.
So it's evolving, and I think the city is ramping up, and even on the way here, I saw so many people out in the street. It's very encouraging.
Right.
There are challenges that we face, but we're meeting them head on. I think everyone wants to get back to some level of normal, or the new normal as we call it, and the NYPD will always be there.
Okay, thank you. That's a great place to end. Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you so much.